What's up, everyone? My name is José Olivarez. The title of this poem is Mexican-American Disambiguation after Idris Goodwin. It's on page 41 if you want to follow along. My parents are Mexican, who are not to be confused with Mexican Americans or Chicanos. I am a Chicano from Chicago, which means I'm a Mexican American with a fancy college degree and a few tattoos. My parents are Mexican, who are not to be confused with Mexicans still living in Mexico. Those Mexicans call themselves Mexicanos. White folks at parties call them pobrecitos. American colleges call them international students and diverse. My mom was white in Mexico, and my dad was mestizo, and after they crossed the border, they became diverse and minorities and ethnic and exotic. But my parents call themselves Mexicanos, who again should not be confused for Mexicanos living in Mexico. Those Mexicanos might call my family gringos, which is the word my family calls white folks. And white folks call my parents interracial. Colleges say, put them on a brochure. My parents say, ¿Qué significa esa palabra? I point out that all the men in my family marry lighter-skinned women. That's the Chicano in me, which means it's the fancy college degrees in me, which is also diverse of me. Everything in me is diverse, even when I eat American foods like hamburgers, which, to clarify, are American when a white person eats them and diverse when my family eats them. So much of America can be understood like this. My parents were undocumented when they came to this country. And by undocumented, I mean sin papeles. And by sin papeles, I mean royally fucked, which should not be confused with the American dream, though the two are cousins. Colleges are not looking for undocumented diversity. My dad became a citizen, which should not be confused with keys to the house. We were safe from deportation, which should not be confused with walking the plank, though they're cousins. I call that sociology, but that's just the Chicano in me who should not be confused with the diversity in me, or the Mexicano in me who is constantly fighting with the upwardly mobile in me, who is good friends with the Mexican American in me, who the colleges love, but only on brochures, who the government calls non-white Hispanic or white Hispanic, who my parents call mijo even when I don't come home so much. Cool. So, like I said, my name is José Olivarez. For me, it's really special to be here. When my parents first moved to the United States, we moved into the South Chicago neighborhood, not too far from here. And I grew up in Calumet City, about like 20 minutes away. So it feels special to get to be here with you. What we're gonna do is I'm gonna read a few poems to you, and then afterwards we'll have time to have a conversation. So thank you for listening, thank you for being here. This next poem is called Getting Ready to Say I Love You to My Dad, It Rains. And it's on page 61. I grew up with like a very old school Mexican father, which means that the way that he showed us that he loved us was by going to work every day, but he never really told us that he loved us. So this poem is about imagining what that conversation would look like. Getting ready to say, I love you to my dad, it rains. I love you, Dad, I say to the cat. I love you, Dad, I say to the sky. I love you, Dad, I say to the mirror. It rains, and my mom's plants open their mouths. My dad stays on the couch. Maybe the couch opened its mouth and started eating my dad. I love you, Dad, I say to the couch, its tongue working my dad like a puppet. I hear the rainfall and think the city is drinking or making itself clean. I'm here with my dad and the TV drones on and on, so I'm not sure I hear it. My dad grunting and nodding, not the mushy stuff I was expecting. Neither of us cry, no hug or a kiss, just a grunt and a nod. I love you, Dad, I say to my dad. We sit together and watch TV. Outside it rains. My dad turns the volume up. The city is drunk. The city is singing badly in the shower. I killed the plant once because I gave it too much water. Lord, I worry that love is violence. My dad is silent and our relationship is not new or clean. I killed the plant once because I didn't give it enough water. My dad and I watch TV on a rainy day. We rinse our mouths with this water. All right, so because I read you a poem that I wrote for my dad, this is one that is more about my mom. So this poem is called I Tried to Be a Good Mexican Son, and it's on page 30. And it's true, I do try to be a good Mexican son. All right. I tried to be a good Mexican son. I even went to college, but I studied African American studies, which is not the law or medicine or business. My mom still loved me, so I invented her sadness and asked her to hold it like a bouquet of fake flowers. She laughed through it all. I didn't understand. Wasn't immigration a burden? What about the life you left? I asked my mom. She planted flowers. Only house on the block with flowers. Foreclosure came like a cold wind. It took her flowers, but that was a season. New house, bigger garden. Mijo, go get some tomates from the yard is something my mom really says. I tried to be a good Mexican son. I went to a good college and learned depression isn't just for white people. I tried to be a good Mexican son, but not that hard. Sometimes my mom's texts get dusty before I answer. Even worse, I never share the Jesus Christ memes she sends me on Facebook. If there's a hell, I'm going express. I hope they have Wi-Fi. I hope I remember to share my mom's Jesus Christ memes. Maybe God believes in second chances, but I doubt it. I tried to be a good Mexican son. I came home for the holidays, still a disappointment. No $1 million job or grandkids. Spanish deteriorating, English getting more vulgar. I tried to be a good Mexican son, but I kept fucking it up. My mom still loves me, even when I can't understand her blessings. She makes me kiss her on the cheek before I leave the house. She tells me to quiet down when she's watching her novelas. She asks me if I'm okay. She tells me I'm getting so skinny and I need to eat more frijoles. She has the pot ready. I try to be a good Mexican son, but all I know how to do is sit down for a good second and leave before a bad one. Cool. So one of the cool things about writing a book, this is my first book, and one of the cool things that happens when you write a book is you can put whatever you want in the book. So this next poem I wrote because in my entire history reading books, I had never read a poem that mentioned the healing properties of Vapid. So this poem is called No Vapid, and it's on page 52. No Vapid. Vapid is pronounced Vapid, like loud or chew. The label for Vapid says it's for cough suppression, but in my house, Vapid is for headaches, sore muscles, nightmares, and everything else. Put some Vapid on my dad's diabetic toes and watch the sugar evaporate. Miss a day of church? Put some Vapid on your forehead and watch forgiveness flush your cheeks. Put some Vapid on our bank account and watch the bill collector stop calling. When I forget a word in Spanish, I take a teaspoon of Vapid under the tongue. I'll read you two more poems and then we can have a conversation. The theme for the Chicago Humanities Festival this year is power. And one of the things that I was thinking about as I was writing my book is that I wanted to write a book of poems that didn't just regurgitate the violence that we see on the news. So in other words, I wanted to write a book of poems that try to transform violence in some way. So this poem I wrote is called "My Family Never Finished Migrating, We Just Stopped," and it's on page 48. Real quick, raise your hand if you have family members that worked in the steel mills. Did anybody have people that worked in the steel mills? Okay, cool. That's what my dad did, and that's what brought us to the United States, was the steel mill. So this poem mentions that. My family never finished migrating, we just stopped. We invented cactus. To survive the winters, we created steel. At my dad's mill, I saw a man dressed like a Martian walk straight into the fire. The flames licked his skin, but like a pet, it never bit him. In the desert, they find our baseball caps, our empty water bottles, but never our bodies. Even the best ice agents can't track us through the storms. But I have a theory. Some of our cousins don't care about LA or Chicago. They build a sanctuary underneath the sand, under the skin we shed, so we can wear the desert like a cobija, under the bones of our loved ones, bones worn thin as thorns to terrorize blue agents, bones worn thin as guitar strings, so when the wind blows, we can follow the music home. All right, so this is the last poem I'll read for now. This poem is called Mexican Heaven. In the book, it's broken up into 8 sections, but I'll read all of them together for you right now. Mexican Heaven. 1, all of the Mexicans sneak into heaven. St. Peter has their name on the list, but none of the Mexicans have trusted a list since Ronald Reagan was president. 2, St. Peter is a Mexican named Pedro, but he's not a saint. Pedro waits at the gate with the shot of tequila to welcome all the Mexicans to heaven, but he gets drunk and forgets about the list. All the Mexicans walk into heaven, even our no good cousins who only go to church for baptisms and funerals. 3, it turns out God is one of those religious Mexicans who doesn't drink or smoke weed, so all the Mexicans in heaven party in the basement while God reads the Bible and thumbs a rosary. God threatens to kick all the Mexicans out of heaven si no paran con las pendejadas, so the Mexicans drink more discreetly. They smoke outside where God won't smell the weed. God pretends the Mexicans are reformed. Hallelujah. This cycle repeats once a month. Amen. 4, Jesus has a tattoo of La Virgen de Guadalupe covering his back. It turns out he's your cousin Jesus from the block. It turns out he gets reincarnated every day and no one on earth cares all that much. 5, all the Mexican women refuse to cook or clean or raise the kids or pay bills or make the bed or drive you to work or do anything except watch their novelas. So heaven is gross. The rats are fat as roosters, and the men die of starvation. 6, there are white people in heaven too. They build condos across the street and ask the Mexicans to speak English. I'm just kidding. There are no white people in heaven. 7, tamales, tacos, tostadas, tortas, pozole, sopes, huaraches, menudo, horchata, jamaica, limonada, agua. 8, St. Peter lets Mexicans into heaven, but only to work in the kitchens. A Mexican dishwasher polishes the crystal, smells the meals, and hears the music. They dream of another heaven, one they might be allowed in if only they work hard enough. Thank you all. Cool. So If you have questions, I think you can walk up to either of the microphones and we can have a conversation.
I go up there?
There's a microphone right next to you. You just walk past it.
Okay.
We'll start here and then we'll go here. Go ahead.
All right. As a Mexican son, like having a Latino heritage behind you and ancestors and all that, what was like the biggest struggle you faced?
What was the biggest struggle that I faced?
Yeah, because of being Mexican.
Well, I think, all right, so I went to Harvard University for undergrad, and when I was there, people assumed that I was there because of affirmative action. They assumed that I didn't deserve to be there. They assumed that, that I wasn't as smart as everybody else. And of course, the news comes out this year that you have like rich parents paying for their children to go to school, right? So in reality, other people are the affirmative action students, right? They're the ones who are paying money to get their students into places. But for me, the challenge has always been that people have underestimated everywhere I went. My very first day of school, when I was going to kindergarten, they took me to the principal's office, which is never a good thing, right, when you're a kid, and they tried to like kick me out of the school. So, and that was because my first language was Spanish. So those are some of the challenges that I faced. Not to mention like just the uncertainty of like what is happening in the country, you know what I mean? I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of challenges for sure.
Boop. Alright. So, cállate. What was like the most disrespectful thing you've heard? Getting towards you. Like you're like, oh, you know what? This is the top. This you being the most. I've had a lot of shit to go through, but you're the worst. What would be that one?
I don't know. I mean, there was like a time in college when
like one that stuck in your head, just like
right.
Stuck
Well, that's
with
what I'm telling you. There was a time in college where there was like these drunk frat boys that decided to like talk trash to me and my friends when we were like hanging out at the river.
Wait. Can y'all please be quiet? I'm trying to hear him. Having a serious conversation here. Thank you.
So that, I don't remember exactly what they said, but I remember like being so angry that I wanted to fight them. And so like I never forget that night for sure.
All right.
Yeah. Over here?
How old are you?
What's that?
How old are you?
I'm 31 years old. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey man, all right. So I like your shit, but why do you think that there are no white people in heaven, bro?
Yeah.
Come on, man.
That's funny.
What'd you say? Why does he think there's no white people in heaven? No. I got nothing against you.
Yeah.
I think you're real cool.
Hold on,
But like,
I'm trying to hear this.
I'm just a little interested.
Why did I write that line?
Yeah.
So I wrote that poem in a couple of different parts. The first part was just the part where white people are in heaven, but they're gentrifying heaven, right? And then when I came back to revise it, I was like, this is how internalized this concept of whiteness and, whatever, racism is in my own head. I can't think of a Mexican heaven that doesn't feature white violence, right? So then I wrote that line because I was like, I can't have it end this way. So then I wrote the punchline. I'm just kidding, there are no white people in heaven. So that's why I wrote that poem, or why I wrote that line. So to your question, I don't know exactly how to answer it. Yeah.
All right. The only thing that I ask is, Imagine we swap shoes. I'm up there. I'm writing my poem.
Yeah.
And I sit there. I am pretty sure I would have a lot of faces looking at me if I ever said that there are no Mexicans in heaven.
Yeah, you're
sure
right. You would have a lot of
everybody in this
people
room would
looking
wanna
at
kick
you.
my ass,
But
yeah.
the reason why is because,
Each one of them.
all right. So, the reason for that is because there's a power difference. You feel me?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
when white people make those jokes, it's not just jokes.
Right.
It's something else. You know what I mean? Versus like part of the reason why I can get away with that line is because, you know, white people kind of own everything. So, you know, white people kind of have, like, if you can't have heaven, you have all of the United States. You know what I mean? You have the whole world. So, like, what are you complaining about? You know what I mean? Like, versus, like, my parents who've worked hard, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
there's a power difference.
No, I definitely agree with you. I really do.
Yeah,
I was just asking.
yeah, for sure.
All right, man. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too.
Hello, hello. Ah, no, que no se podían poner calladitos. Sí saben. All right, we have one question over here. Are you guys trying to scare us? It's not working. All right. Come on.
What's your most, how did you deal with any racist comments or any bullying, and what would you advice you give for any other kids that deal with racism?
My advice is that you belong everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, if people say things to you, it's about their own insecurities and it's not about you. You know what I'm saying? I remember that I used to get some bullying when I was going to elementary school because I spoke Spanish first, right? And so people would like make fun of my accent or whatever. But that's an incredible gift to be able to speak multiple languages. You know what I mean? So try not to internalize other people's garbage.
And what was your motivation?
You have another question? Go ahead.
What was, I can't say it, but like motivation? So, yeah.
She's asking what kept you motivated to keep going.
What motivated me to keep writing?
Yeah.
What motivated me to keep writing was the belief, like I believe in the power of stories. I believe that, you know, before I started writing, I was kind of on one path, and writing helped me kind of take ownership of my own life. It helped me take control of what I wanted to do, as opposed to just like living the life that other people wanted me to live. So for me, that's what kept me going, was like a belief in the power of stories. Thank you. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you if, like, how do you feel that everyone else can relate to what you write? Because I can relate to it, so how do you relate? Like, how do you feel that your fans can relate to your work?
So I feel great that people can relate to it. I wrote it in part thinking about like what I needed to hear when I was like 15, 16 years old. Like I said, I grew up in Calumet City, Illinois. My plan early on was like, I'm gonna move back to Mexico and then everything will make sense for me. You know what I'm saying? So like learning that I didn't really belong there or here, like I was trying to write a book that I could have used when I was a teenager, that might have helped me feel like I was at home, that might have helped me feel seen. So, you know, I'm glad that people relate to it because that's what I wanted, you know?
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, thank you. Over here?
When did you start poetry?
Say that again?
When did you start poetry?
I started writing poetry when I was 15 years old. I started writing as part of the Louder Than a Bomb poetry program here in Chicago, and I haven't stopped writing since.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
I got 2 questions.
Yeah.
Number one, hold up, brain freeze. Dang, I just forgot my question.
Okay.
Whenever you're at a family gathering and you see all your family around you and you just feel like you're left out because you think you came from hold on. When you're at a family gathering and you see all your relatives around you and they look really Mexican and you're just there and you think that you're not Mexican enough to be with your family. Have you ever thought of that?
So I don't feel that way, and I haven't thought of myself that way. My family has always loved me. I think a lot of the insecurities that I had were in my own head. You know what I'm saying? Part of what I discovered writing my book was like, I didn't have to choose one side or the other. You know what I mean? Like, you can be both. Instead of having to choose between Mexico and the United States, like, you can choose whatever you want from both cultures. Both cultures are beautiful. And so it's not that one culture is better than the other. It's that, you know, you can feel at home in both.
Do you have any hobbies or things that you do other than poetry?
Yeah, of course. Today I'm gonna go see the Detective Pikachu movie that's in theaters. I'm excited about that. I like play video games and hang out with my friends.
What's your favorite video game?
What's my favorite video game?
Yeah.
I play NBA 2K. That's kind of the one that I'm most into.
On PS4 or Xbox?
On PS4. Yeah.
I would have busted.
That's the controversial statement, PS4 over Xbox. That's funny. Over here?
Hey, she went like 3 times already.
What's your aspiration in life?
All right, so the question is, what is my aspiration in life? My aspiration is just to continue to grow as a person and to be able to keep writing books and connect with people. I believe, like I said, I believe in the power of stories. So I hope to keep making stories and keep having conversations with people.
So the thing with you is you want to connect with people.
Yeah.
That's like your goal, connecting, reaching out, giving a hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you're trying to do? Like with your whole books and poetry, that's like your main goal on everything?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Did you play sports when you were younger?
I did. So I grew up in, I was born in 1988. So I grew up during like the Jordan era of the Chicago Bulls. So I grew up playing basketball.
Were you good?
No, I'm not good. I'm not good at basketball. But I still play. Like, that's still one of my hobbies for sure. I played a little bit of soccer. I played soccer until 8th grade. You wanna?
How you feel about that? Like, black people can relate to what you're saying. Like, low key, like, I'm like one of the like not too many black freshmen that's here. Like, black people kind of feel the same way that you feel. Like, we don't really fit in school and stuff. So it's like.
Yeah. So for me, that's really important. In part, like I said, I grew up in Calumet City. The 2 predominant cultures in Calumet City are black people and then Mexicans. You know what I'm saying? So I grew up I grew up with black neighbors. And so for me, that, like, how I got started writing was in the tradition, not just of Mexican writers like Sandra Cisneros, but in, like, the tradition of black writers like Gwendolyn Brooks and James Baldwin. So for me, like, it's important, like, I really believe that if we're going to build a better Chicago, it has to be in collaboration with all of the different, you know, people that are kind of struggling to get a hold. You know what I'm saying? Like, my family was not the only family in Calumet City that was affected by foreclosures, and it wasn't just Mexican families. So how can we build something together? So it's important for me for sure.
So you did a poem about heaven. All right. as coming from a Mexican family, a lot of Mexican families like are religious, Christians, Catholics, whatever you want to say. Are you yourself, like, how would I say? You're in a religion, like you would kind of like go towards religion to reach out to people, or no?
So I grew up Catholic. I've done all the sacraments up until I got confirmed. I did my confirmation as a Catholic. So for me, that is part of like my upbringing. You know what I mean? Like it's ingrained in me. So for me, religion at its best, I think, can offer people a chance to like strive for liberation, right? Like I think about like a lot of the lessons that I took away as a kid, and the ones that have stayed with me were about, just liberation in general. So religion is important to me. My relationship has changed over time. Like I don't go to the church every week the way I used to, but spirituality continues to be important for me.
Okay, another quick question.
Yeah.
In like your whole journey of what you've been doing, what was your breaking point? Like where you were like almost about to break and just give up and saying, I can't do this like I thought I could.
I don't know what my breaking point has been. I think that, I don't know. I've never thought about quitting. There have been times like, my family wanted me to be a lawyer. And so there was times when I wanted to be a lawyer so I could, make my family proud and like do what they wanted. But even then I was still writing poems. Like it's always like, this is kind of my path, and I've kind of chosen to embrace it. So I don't know that there's ever been a breaking point. There have been challenges for sure, but I've been pretty devoted to the craft. Yes.
I was just gonna ask, did you ever bang growing up as a kid?
Did I ever what?
Like bang in the streets?
No. So like I said, I grew up in Calumet City, and
We saw some.
And the generation that I was in, like, missed banging for the most part. My brother, who's 1 year younger than me, he grew up like going to those parties and like hanging out with that, but I missed it by that close. You know what I'm saying? But I myself never did that, even though like I have family members and stuff. Yes.
What's your favorite holiday and why?
What's my favorite what?
Holiday.
Holiday? My favorite holiday is, I don't know, maybe Labor Day? Yeah, I like Labor Day. I like Labor Day because there's no fireworks and there's not a lot of, and it's like chill and it's low key. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanksgiving is good too, for sure.
What's your cover about?
What's my what?
What's your cover about? What does it represent?
All right, so the cover is done by an artist named Scent Rock. I gave him a bunch of poems and he made this original artwork from my book. So for me, it's really special to me. Scent Rock has been one of my favorite artists for a long time. He lives in Chicago. You can see his murals throughout the city. And so what you see on the cover is a couple of things, right? Like one, it's a person wearing a burn mask, which for me like symbolizes like the aspirations, the hopes, right? It's somebody who's just a regular person, but who's trying to take off, who's trying to fly. And then you see that the person has a bunch of contradictions, right? Like they, there's like the Mexican flag symbol, but then there's also like skyscrapers from Chicago, and they're wearing like a rosary, but they have tattoos and they're carrying liquor. Like for me, I wanted the book to be about like the contradictions and the joys and all the things that make up being a Chicano for me.
How has your life changed because of poetry?
I couldn't hear that. Will you repeat that question?
How has your life changed because of poetry?
My life has changed a lot because of poetry. When I was 13 years old, 12 years old, I was really shy, really quiet, and I was kind of following the path that other people asked me to take, right? Like, my parents wanted me to be a good student, my teachers, no one ever asked me what I wanted. And so poetry became the way that I could ask my own questions and find my own answers. So for me, it's been life-changing. It's helped me build a life that is truly mine and not other people's.
Have you seen Endgame?
I have seen Endgame, yeah. I thought it was better than Infinity Wars. That's my take.
Do we have any more questions? We have a little bit more time if we want more questions. Otherwise, we can say that was last question.
Do you want to do one last poem?
Sure, I could do one last poem. All right, this poem is called Gentrification. It's a poem that I wrote. Raise your hand if you've heard the word gentrification before. All right, so a bunch of people have heard the word gentrification. Gentrification was a word that one of my friends first said, and he said it kind of like, maybe that could be, if gentrification is like how we lose home, then maybe gentrification could be how we find home. So this is the poem. It's on page 64 if you want to follow along. Gentrification. I plant a grain of sand in the new organic juice spot in El Barrio. Soon donkeys shit big stinky shits on carrot containers. Our tios y tias smoking cigarettes and taking up all the plugs. The grain of sand grows into a cactus, and mi abuelita Jacinta is back with the living. She's kicking the juicers out of her kitchen and making masa. The whole block heard what's happening, and outside the hydrants open and flood the streets. The bad news is the property value is going down again. The good news is my boy Nate is teaching poetry workshops in the shade. Gwendolyn Brooks smelled the tamales and came down to write. Rejoice in the good news. My dad comes through with the cooler of beer, and no one gets drunk enough to fight. My mom's French braid gets longer every minute. Soon it will be long enough to toss to our cousins in Mexico, in LA, in Texas. There are Mexicans in DC who got the call. Salvadorians bringing pupusas. From the cactus, we get a steel mill. From the steel mill, we get more tortillas. The bad news is the economists say there is zero economic value on our block. The good news is we threw away the economics textbooks. We trade tortillas for haircuts, nopales for healthcare, poems for groceries, and if all you can do is eat the food, we ask that you wash your dishes. The donkeys bless everything we grow. From the tortillas, we get more desert. And from the desert, we get lowriders. Cars bounce, our cousins and gangs get their bendiciones. The whole block is alive and not for sale. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo rescinded. It's happening on our block, and maybe it's happening on your block. The bad news is the president sends the National Reserve. The good news is they'll never find us. We pack everything into the trunk of a Toyota Corolla. When La Migra comes, their dogs bark and spit, but all they find is grains of sand. Cool, thank you all.
Okay, real quick, we got one more question that was asked. Can you rap?
So I know how to rap, but that's not something that I'm very good at, you know? No, that's all. Listen, you don't need a sample. That's the truth. You think you want a sample, but you don't need a sample for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jose, for that wonderful program. If everyone, yeah, thank you.